So I guess I'll make those calls to China later today on your phone.
Can't do the China thing.
All right. Before I start on to actually what I was going to talk with y'all about, next month I'm assuming I'm going to be here at this point, but I've still got to look at the schedule, how it works. Month of July, just like it was last year, I'm on the road from place to place, even worse than last year, I think. And I think I'm going to make it back in time to here. So I've got to plot that one out. But if I am here, if I act a little tired that morning, just ignore it. As I'm in Arkansas, the end of June into the beginning of July for the National BB gun match that I do every year. And then I leave from there, go to Denver for a Kiwanis convention for several days over the 4th of July and through that weekend. And I come back, and those two literally overlapped. I was going to not go to Kiwanis International Convention until they called me a few weeks ago and told me that I had been selected as a distinguished governor for last year, and that the dinner they were having in recognition of those of us, which is the top third governors of districts throughout the world, was going to be on July the 3rd evening. The only problem was the BB gun match closing ceremony is at the same time, same evening in Arkansas, and they're in Denver. And my transporter still does not work to repair parts sitting somewhere out at sea for years now. And I plotted it out, figured out I can basically do my job at the BB gun match, except I won't attend closing ceremonies, but I'll have a hurried up morning because I shoot pictures of every kid that goes to the match. And there's 400 kids usually about there. And they shoot on 2 mornings. They do half their shooting one morning, the other half the next morning. And so normally I do half of them one morning, the other half the other morning, and that gives me breaks. Well, I won't get the break this time. And then I'll get in the car and drive to Denver, which is 750 miles, and for a day and a half, that's not bad. Because actually getting to Rogers, Arkansas, which any of you that don't know where Rogers, Arkansas is, it's beside this little town that you probably have heard of, or at least you have seen the name on trucks on the road, which is Bentonville. What's in Bentonville? Walmart. And actually, the original Walmart was in Rogers. And they're twin towns, and you can't tell when you leave one and go into the other. And where we have the match technically is Rogers, but I really feel like I'm closer to downtown Bentonville and the Walmart Museum than I am to downtown Rogers. They probably ought to do like Twin City did here and just combine the two. But they can't do anything with either name because they both have historical value. So I will head to Denver and then back. Back for a week, and then I go to Frisco, Texas, which I do every year for training for a week. And then when I come back from there, will be time to come and speak to y'all that Sunday morning. And if I'm confused that Sunday morning about where I am, that may be.
I want to know where you park your plane.
You want to know what?
Where you park your plane.
It'd be easier if I had a plane. I got the car with 945,000 miles sitting out there.
Well, that Rogers, Arkansas, that's where they used to make Daisy BB guns, isn't it?
Huh?
Daisy BB guns were made in Rogers, Arkansas.
Yeah. And that's actually who sponsors the match.
Okay.
So Daisy's the one paying for me to go to Rogers. Because they put me up in the Embassy Suites Hotel there. And for those of you that haven't stayed in Embassy Suites, if you ever get a chance to, stay there and be sure you have an empty stomach when you wake up in the morning. Because they cook omelets to order for you as you watch them cook it. And this one there in Rogers does the best job of any of the Embassy Suites I've ever been in on the omelets. I'll usually eat 2 omelets every morning and some pancakes and then other food mixed in there with it too, but I got to go have my omelet at least every morning. And any of you that have been out in the Midwest out there also, there's an ice cream chain out there, Brahms. I got a few nods on that are apparently eaten there. The weight I've got on me comes from those 2 places. I love my Brahms ice cream. And if there is one anywhere near me, I will go get. And they've got 2 within 2 miles of my hotel there. So at least twice a day, I'm eating an ice cream cone or more. I eat in there so often. The other year, I'm sitting there eating my ice cream cone that the girl behind the counter walks up to me with a banana split in her hand and says, "Would you like a banana split?" And I said, "Well, it'd be good, but I wasn't planning on buying one." She said, "I didn't say anything about you buying one. Do you want a banana split?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll take it." She said, "We made one and it turned out it was an error that we weren't supposed to make, so either I can give it away or trash it." So she said, "And I picked you out because I see you in here the last couple of days." So I ate ice cream cone and banana split. So I'm trying to get my way to be like him. If there was a Brahms here, I'd probably... Huh? If there was a Brahms here in Swainsboro, I'd probably have a hard time getting through the door. Because I love their ice cream. And they're all over the Midwest. It's a family-owned chain out there. So when the month of July ends, I may weigh a few more pounds. Except I'm going to run myself around while I'm there at the BB gun match. So in any event, August, I'm going to have this other eye with a lift on it. This one's simple. It's just a facelift to it because the surgeon told me when he saw this one after he'd done it that he could do this one, which is just age related is all it is. It's not anything from the other. And he said, "I can do this one because this one used to, if y'all remember, looked wide open. Now, with this one wide open, it doesn't quite look the same." So in mid-August, he's supposed to do that one. And should be quick and simple for him. So, we're a crazy summer. So, today, where I want to come from, as I told Carl earlier, we're in Luke today, because he said he may be still in Genesis when I get started. But that's the reason I got my glasses off, is since I had the surgery done, which is where I was starting towards, my eyes have adapted from it, and now I read easier with the glasses off than with them on. And then 90 days after I had this surgery, they said, go back and see the eye doctor and get a regular eye appointment and get my lenses and everything corrected. So sometime November or something, I'll go see Dr. Yancey again. But my eyesight has actually improved in the process. So I'm coming from Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31. These things out of the way. There was a rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. He ate well. And at his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, full of sores, who desired to be fed with what fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. The poor man died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. And in Hades, being in torment, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus in his bosom. And he called out, Father Abraham, have mercy upon me, and send Lazarus to dip the end of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that you in your lifetime received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner evil things, but now he is comforted here, and you are in anguish. And besides all this, between us and you a great chasm has been fixed, in order that those who would pass from here to you may not be able, and none may pass from there to us. And he said, Then I beg you, Father, to send him to my brothers, so that he may warn them, lest they also come into this place of torment. But Abraham answered, They have Moses and the prophets. Let them hear them. And he said, No, Father Abraham, if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent. And he said to him, If they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced if someone should rise from the dead. And the title I would put on this message today is 2 and 2 and 2. That we're going to talk about things that occur in twos in here for a little bit. Because the first thing that we see in here is that there's two men. And that Jesus talks about these two men. And this one is labeled as a parable, but there's some debate of whether it's a parable or not, because it breaks one rule of all the other parables. That the rest of the parables all given, there's no names given of individuals, that they're all just anonymous people out there. And in this case, it names Lazarus. The assumption by many is that Jesus just put a name on that character in this one for some reason. Why? Don't know. But that it's still purely parable, a hypothetical story out there. There's others that would argue with you that because he names Lazarus, that this may have been a true story related to some situation that occurred right there in that town that people knew, where Lazarus used to lay at a gate of some rich person. Nothing else documented anywhere that says that's true. I'm assuming it's a parable. And the things I have heard on this one, basically the teachers all said they saw it as a parable. But you may hear some say that's not a parable, that whether it's a parable or not doesn't really make any big difference, because it's still a good story right there. And stories can be about true things or false things. So, two men mentioned in the story. One that's rich, extremely rich by the description, and one that's the other extreme of extremely poor. And that see each other every day. Because the rich man is described in his riches of that he's dressed in purple. He wasn't in cheap purple, he was in expensive purple, which they got drops of purple from some type mollusk that you could boil it and just get a few drops of some purple out of that to make purple dye, to make expensive purple clothes with the real good purple that everybody wanted to wear. There was another way to make some cheap purple dye that you could have bought at Walmart. But I guess Walmart wasn't around then. And that's not the purple he was wearing. He was wearing the expensive linen clothes in purple to distinguish himself clearly out there as he had money when he was seen by anybody. And that he was money and power there. And that he had an expensive place. He lived in a gated house because Lazarus was brought by somebody apparently and laid at his gate every day, hoping that when this rich man passed him by, he would give him something, either some alms or some food or something there, and was in bad shape and had some disease to him, or he had sores on him, etc., and that he was just hoping for anything and existed on hardly anything. And that he was so bad off, notice that the rich man's dogs would come and lick his sores. And you know how, insulting that was to the man to have a dog lick his sores, and particularly in the society at that time. Because even today, that if a dog was to walk up and go to lick on our sore, we wouldn't. If it was our dog that we're always with, it might be a little bit different, but we still don't want licked by the dog. And that the dogs were, from what's described here, the only comfort to that man that was in the poor man that was existing there. And laying by that gate daily, and the rich man, it says, walks right by him every day and paid him no attention there. The rich man, very much rich, and very much noted that he was clothed well, fine linen, and ate very well every day. He had his own Brahms ice cream store in the house there. At least that's what it sounds like to me. And if it was as hot as it is here today, having your own ice cream store there at your house would be nice. So the two of them were in completely different existence. The poor man, Lazarus, getting by with what he could of what some people did for him, and trying to get stuff just to better exist. And then the other man of the rich one, and that's his description on it, living a real sumptuous life and being real well there on it. So two extremes on it. Because notice the extremes he went to, Jesus described them on. Lazarus at the bottom and the rich man at the very top. Because both of them are described basically as high or as low as you could get them. And so two extremes on it. And that they both live that life. The two of them die, that they both die in time. And they have two completely different outcomes to them. As opposed to fairy tales and everything else we read, the rich man didn't live on nicely forever. It didn't fit with the normal, I'm sure, the stories that they heard back then growing up, just like we hear today. You know, where the poor girl marries the prince and lives forever richly. In this case, the whole story flip-flops. Lazarus dies and goes to heaven. And it says he was lying in Abraham's bosom, which he was laying right there with Abraham, laying there together, watching the world go by, or heaven go by, I guess, not the world go by, and just living the life right there. And when he was hungry now, that Abraham was probably spoon feeding him just like a child. That he was that close with Abraham there, and that he had everything he could possibly want in living now a permanent afterlife and perfection. And that he has been rewarded with that. The rich man didn't get to take the U-Haul with him to the graveyard. As we all hear the joke about, do you ever see the hearse pulling a U-Haul on the way to the graveyard? But he ended up in Hades, making today's temperatures feel comfortable to us from the description right there. So just imagine it being hotter than what we're going through. Today's supposed to be cooler than yesterday is what my phone's been telling me for the last 12 hours. I'm not sure if we'll be able to tell that or not. But he's sitting there in Hades, suffering, full pain, and just dying from it. Interesting enough, it says they could see each other and could talk across there, but that was it. And that he sees Lazarus with Abraham in pure comfort laying over there. And he's in severe pain. Notice what the rich man does. He got to ask Abraham to send Lazarus to him. Think of how insulting that would have been to the rich man and his whole picture of himself, his whole life. Of this man that he walked around to leave every day that he left his place. Because of how bad that man was, and he didn't want to be seen or anything else with them. And now he's begging for Abraham to send Lazarus to him. And not only that, to just dip his finger in water and stick it in his mouth for him to feel the cooler water in his mouth for a moment. Think about how insulting that had to be to the rich man on it, to be asking something like that. He didn't want to come near, if this was a doorway, he did not want to come near Lazarus laying there, that he walked around him to not come near him so he wouldn't get whatever he was all suffering. And now he's begging for that body to come and stick a wet finger in his mouth. Think about the insulting to that man on making that request. But that was about the lowest thing he probably could have done of asking. To ask on that. Because he didn't want to get anywhere near him when he was alive. Because it just might something come off of him. And now he's asking for him to come and stick his finger in his mouth to offer some cooling to him for a moment. Not just wipe the finger on his face, but stick it in his mouth as a coolant. And that's extreme on it, because think about it. We're real careful on whoever we ever let touch inside our body on us. That you got to be somebody special on it. The doctors get away with it because we got them in a special category. But we're not real big on that one at all. 2 men, 2 totally different outcomes. But not the outcome you would think in terms of the first life. They've now completely switched positions. Lazarus is now living the life. He's laying on the beach in the Bahamas with Abraham. and having food and drink brought to them laying there on the beach every day. To use it in terms of what a lot of times we think of today, if we could go lay on the beach in the Bahamas for a good while, it would be a nice breakaway for us. At least it's the big TV ad for us. 2 totally different ones. And the request to then be able to do something different. 2 possible outcomes for the rich man at that point when he makes the request. Abraham could present the request to him, couldn't. Abraham turns him down and says it can't be done. And he makes a request that God, or Abraham, send Lazarus back to life to speak to the people, to his brothers, and keep them from going down there with him to Hades. 2 answers that Abraham could have given him. Abraham could have said, yes, we'll send Lazarus back. Or Abraham could have told him, as he did, nope, can't be done. You're stuck here. 2 possible outcomes for him. So 2 men, 2 positions they ended up in, and now 2 possible outcomes of a request of send Lazarus to take care of my brothers. Notice what Abraham's answer is. And the translations, depending on the translation you look at, varies a little bit on it. Because in this one, it talks about that Moses and the prophets have already been there, and that they should have listened to them, and that he should have listened to them. Other translations say about the Bible, or not the Bible, but the I'm trying to remember the word they use for the scriptures, that the scriptures were there for them. I was trying to think the correct word on that. But they had the scriptures to go by. And whenever the Bible says in their references back to the scriptures, they're talking about pay attention to what was told to you in the Old Testament. That the Old Testament is what they're calling the scriptures. For us today, it's the Old Testament and the New Testament. But there, in Jesus' time, the scriptures was the Old Testament. So they were to listen to all of these people that have come before them. And that Abraham's response is, nope, can't send Lazarus, but it wouldn't make any difference anyway. Even if I did send him back to see your brothers, that they wouldn't change their ways just by seeing him. And how often do we see that true? Just like what's described there as Jesus described Abraham saying. That things that seem impossible may catch our attention momentarily, but we don't pay attention long term to it. Or we listen to the scriptures from the prophets and the others, but we don't really listen. We momentarily hear it and let it go. And that he says they wouldn't listen on that. And that Jesus in turn is telling this parable. And you can relate it right into his life there too. Because think about it. All of those people, tens of thousands that saw and listened to him, but yet did not turn his way on it after having watched him perform the miracles all throughout, and it didn't make any difference. Or the leaders of the Jewish faith that had him executed there at the end and didn't change, even though they saw what all was there. And that there was somebody that was risen from the dead and reappeared and still had no impact on so many, just like Jesus is saying right here. So in a way, Jesus is talking about his own life in terms of it too, of that if the rich man had asked Abraham to send Jesus to them, of what difference was it going to make to so many, that so many were just going to ignore it. Now let us not be in that group today. Let us not be caught of not listening and not hearing what Jesus is telling us, and to be aware and to know on it, so that we don't end up in the rich man's position, but we end up there with Lazarus enjoying a permanent vacation that's enjoyable that we get from there, instead of lying in torment from it, of being stuck outside, or today, if the air conditioner hadn't worked, being stuck inside listening to Dwight in this horrible heat this morning. Y'all might have gotten up and walked out on me a few minutes ago. Not because anything I had said, but that you just couldn't stay in the heat any longer. So pay attention on what they are. Remember the three twos in it, that the story had 3 sets of 2 to it. That's a bunch of twos. It was 2 men, which is what everybody knows about, that it was a rich man and Lazarus. There was 2 outcomes to their lives. One went to Hades, one went to heaven. But it wasn't the ones that you would have thought from what you saw there on earth, and what they probably both thought as they were living was going to happen. And then there was 2 outcomes to the question of, can you send Lazarus to go warn my brothers? And there was 2 possible outcomes there, and that God answered one of those. And that there was the possibility of what was requested there. So 3 different twos in the whole story that day, in that short parable there. So keep that all in mind. And just keep in mind, as we suffer through our heat right here, it's supposed to cool off a tiny little bit for a day or two, that where the rich man was, if he could have been in this heat today, he would have been happy, instead of what he was suffering in. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for the message this morning. And ask for each one of us to hear what you want us to hear from it, and to be with us all this coming week.